Many people have the expectation that only name brand mechanical keyboards with Cherry MX switches from companies such as Razer, Logitech, and Corsair are of the utmost quality. However, in today's video I will be checking out the BlitzWolf BW-KB1 from BangGood, a keyboard in the sub $50 price range that highly challenges that mindset. Let's take a look. Welcome to Top Spec, your one-stop shop for tech content. Before we start this video, I should let you know that I was sent today's product for free, but as always, all opinions expressed in this video will be my own. Anyways, let's jump right in. The BW-KB1 is a 60% mechanical keyboard that comes in white and black variants and with 3 different switch options as well: Gateron browns, blues, and reds. The configuration I was sent has a black exterior and came with browns, but more on the switches later. In terms of lighting, every key is individually lit, RGB, and can be customized via the onboard controls or the software that you can download from the BlitzWolf website. The onboard controls allow you to scroll through several very gamery presets, adjust the speed of the effect, and even control the brightness as well. Now that might be enough options for some people, but I prefer a much more subtle look, so I chose to download the software, which actually took a little bit to find given this keyboard is from a smaller company. Alright, so it's actually a different day, and as you can tell by how dark it is and my phone, it's 3 in the morning, but we thought it would be cool if we went through some of the lighting presets really quickly, but if you absolutely do not care, skip to this time to go on with the review. Anyway, for those of you who do care, I am in the BlitzWolf software. Our first preset is just a static one. You can pick whatever color you want, pretty straightforward. Then there's one called single on. It's like a reactive thing. So if you type, it responds. Then there's single off, which is the opposite of that. So when you hit keys, it turns them off for a second. Then there's glittering, which kind of just flashes keys on and off at random. Falling, which is this kind of obnoxious effect, but it's pretty cool. One called Colorful, which gives me Christmas vibes, but it's pretty cool. Then there's Breath, which is your classic fade in, fade out effect. Then there's Spectrum, which just fades through all of the colors on the RGB spectrum. Then there's Outward, which seems to be just pushing colors from the center outwards. Then there's Scrolling, which appears to be scrolling through different colors on a row-to-row basis. Rolling does something pretty similar. Rotating, which is kind of like a pinwheel thing where it's spinning around. Explode, which is another reactive one, where it kind of is just more obnoxious. Launch is another reactive one, even more obnoxious. It takes up all the rows, but what would you do without obnoxious effects? Ripples, which manages to be more obnoxious. Then there's Flowing, which just scrolls by row to row. Then there's Pulsating, which whatever this is doing. Then there's Tilt, which appears to be changing colors from diagonal to diagonal. And then finally there's Shuttle, which is another more subtle RGB effect. And actually, I should also mention that you are capable of changing every key individually. So let's say I want to make U like a red or something. I can just apply that, and then now U is red. So if you have very specific controls that you use for a game or something, that's pretty cool. Anyways, that's it for the lighting effects. Back to the video. To save you the time, I have left a link to the software as well as a driver update in the description down below, but there's a few things that you should know. By default, the software will be in a different language, so you will have to click the gear in the upper right hand corner, and then click the drop down list and pick English. Also, if the keyboard is not being detected by the software, it's because you need to put it in wired mode, which you can simply do by holding the function key and the tab key at the same time. Beyond those 2 quirks, the software actually works great despite looking a little bit aged. There is an abundance of lighting effects to choose from, and you can even change the color of every individual key if you so please. Also, another welcomed feature is the built-in remapping of keys, given this is a 60% keyboard and many keys are missing. I'm going to talk more about the layout later, but something worth noting right now is that you cannot remap the function key for whatever reason. That being said, this is still entirely possible using something like Auto Hotkey, but given the fact that you use the function key to access the secondary keys such as page up, page down, and delete, its exclusion is noteworthy. Moving on to the layout, this is not a standard 60% keyboard, but that is not a bad thing in my opinion. BlitzWolf has opted to add a set of arrow keys in the lower right, in turn moving the question mark and slash button to the right, shortening the right shift, and not including a right control or Windows key. The biggest offender here is probably the shortened right shift key, which won't bother me because I never use the right shift, but I know that this will irk some people, so it's worth pointing out. Moving on the bottom of the BW-KB1 are 6 rubber pads and 2 feet that can be extended for typists who prefer to type at an angle. However, it's worth noting that once extended, the incline is extremely pronounced, most likely because the feet don't appear to be any shorter than those on a full-size keyboard. I don't love typing at an angle in general, so maybe I'm just being picky here, but I won't be extending the feet on the BW-KB1. The last feature I'd like to discuss before we move on to a quick typing test and more discussion about the switches is the Bluetooth functionality. The BW-KB1 can be used wirelessly via Bluetooth, or you can use the included USB-C to Type A cable to connect it directly to your PC. Speaking of which, there is a singular USB-C port on the top left of the device, which I believe is an optimal position for most people. It's just generally impressive that this has USB-C at all given how cheap it is. Anyways, going back to the Bluetooth functionality, in order to switch between wired mode and Bluetooth mode, you have to flip a switch on the back of the keyboard and it will automatically pair after the first time. This switch on the back that toggles the Bluetooth functionality is perhaps the cheapest feeling thing about the BW-KB1 since it is so prone to wear, but I assume that most people will develop a preference to either having it wired or in Bluetooth mode and won't be constantly switching back and forth, so this is not a huge issue. The last thing I'd like to say about the Bluetooth functionality is that the spacebar will automatically turn green and stay green while the device is charging. To my knowledge, there is no way to override that light, but it will automatically turn off when the 1900 mAh battery is fully charged. Speaking of which, the keyboard has a battery life of around 20 hours when the LEDs are turned on, and over a week when they are turned off, and I think those figures are more than adequate. As I mentioned earlier, the BW-KB1 that I was sent has Gateron browns, which you may or may not be familiar with. Gateron is essentially a Cherry MX copycat brand that produces extremely similar switches for a far cheaper price. Regardless of whether they're browns, blues, or reds, they are commonly known to have a smoother feeling than their Cherry MX equivalents and don't have that scratchy feeling that's associated with Cherry MX switches. A common critique, however, is that Gateron switches are not as consistent in their feel across an entire keyboard as a set of Cherry MX switches would be, but I have personally not picked up on this inconsistency whatsoever. Also, if you aren't sure what browns feel like, they're highly tactile switches that spring back very quickly. They're also commonly known to be the quieter mechanical switch, but that's not to say they're silent at all. Let me show you a quick typing test. So hopefully that gave you an idea of what the keyboard sounds like. Also, as I have been doing with the other keyboard reviews on this channel so far, I'd like to do a quick comparison between the BW-KB1 and other keyboards I've used and reviewed in the past to see how fast I can type on them. So from this chart, you can see that the BW-KB1 is about on the same level as the Black Widow Lite in terms of words per minute. The only reason I would assume that this is not above the Black Widow Lite is because I've only had about a week of experience with it, while I had closer to a month with the Black Widow Lite. Anyways, as usual, there were no surprises in terms of accuracy. All of the keyboards were within an acceptable margin of error of each other. The BW-KB1 blows me away in terms of how much you get for what you pay for. A detachable USB-C cable, individually lit mechanical keys, out-of-the-box reprogrammability, and even Bluetooth functionality are among the great features that this keyboard has to offer. The only real critiques I have of it are the compromises it has made to allow a set of arrow keys to be on a 60% keyboard, as well as the switch on the back that feels a little bit cheap. So overall, even though the BW-KB1 is composed of plastic, do not let the exterior fool you. I could highly recommend this keyboard for anyone in the market for an affordable mechanical keyboard. Anyways, that's all I really have to say for today. If you are interested in keyboard reviews or tech content in general, we upload videos every single Monday here at Spec. So if that sounds like it's up your alley, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.